Hello and welcome to Stained Glass Gaming, where I turn video games into glass. This time, I am making the Javelin icons from Anthem. Now despite the issues this game has, I enjoy it and play on Xbox. Though I am frustrated by the bugs and load times, and I wish there was more weapon variety, but to their credit, BioWare are working to fix the issues. The game is in a better state than when it launched, and I love the flying and loot grinding. One of my favorite game series is Monster Hunter, and fans know that praying to RNGesus is essential. I guess RNGesus is still deciding how generous it wants to be in Anthem with its loot drops. On the storm, I cut the paper too close to the edge, and, for lack of a better term, one of the wings was about to fall off. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem, but since I am making this as one piece of glass, I have to cut out the pattern again. I am using the colors that appeared in the promotional art. Yellow for the Ranger, red for the Colossus, blue for the Storm, and green for the Interceptor. Clear glass is used to fill in the gaps. When I split each Javelin icon into pieces, it's simple. The complex part will be using the Dremel to cut and grind the pieces. Scoring the glass makes it easier to break and gives nice, straight edges. Sometimes glass doesn't break as I expect it to. Case in point. The last time I used the Dremel was in the Undertale video, and the setup for that was not the best. To improve it, I layer the glass between pieces of foam to reduce the vibrations from the Dremel. I tried clamping the glass between two pieces of wood, but realized the glass moved too much when coming into contact with the Dremel. I used one hand to hold the glass sandwich, and the other to control the Dremel. Holding the Dremel with one hand and trying to be precise is difficult, so I use a cardboard box to rest my hand on while I Dremel. Later on, I covered the box with duct tape because the box became soggy from the water spraying off the Dremel. I used a plastic bottle with a hole punched in the lid and superglued aquarium tubing to direct the water where I need it. I initially wrapped the tubing in the copper wire I used to hang the finished project, but the wire wasn't stiff enough, so I used solder wire instead. I constantly reposition the Dremel because unlike the grinding process, I can't move the glass against the Dremel head. I have to move the Dremel itself. The smallest diameter grinding bit I have is 1/8 inch, and even it can't reach into the tight corners. That is why I use the Dremel. The grinding bits I have for the Dremel are smaller and can reach the tight corners. I wasn't recording when this happened, but I broke 2 more pieces while using the Dremel. I probably applied too much pressure and it caused the glass to break. The reason I am using a Dremel is because I don't have a ring saw, which would allow me to cut the odd angles much faster than a Dremel. Since I broke the 2 pieces, I am worried about the tighter corners for the Storm Javelin. After many hours of grinding and dremeling, I finally finished with all the pieces. Each of the Javelin icons have some part that isn't flush. This was due to recutting the pattern and over-grinding. There is a workaround for this. I am going to try 2 methods, foiling over twice and adding wire during soldering. The thinnest foil I have is the 7/32 inch width black backed foil, which I am going to be using for all the pieces. I line up the width of the glass and the middle of the foil as much as possible, then press the foil using a burnishing tool. I use an X-Acto knife to cut the corners so I can fold the foil onto the sides. The challenging bit is foiling the clear pieces. These are the most awkward shape I have ever foiled. The clear part of the interceptor frustrated me the most because I couldn't get enough of a grip without worrying about breaking the glass. The foil splits at areas where I had to use the Dremel. I expected this because it happened in my Undertale video, and it will show when I solder. Now I'm not sure if this is an actual stained glass term, but my teacher told me about it. In areas that I know the foil will split, I use a technique called saddling. This means I take a piece of foil and fold it over the area. Then I foil over it again when I foil the whole piece and trim the parts that stick out. If the foil does split, then there is foil underneath. I wasn't able to record during the saddling technique, but I will in a future video. I tried this with the interceptor Javelin, but I couldn't do it right and it looked worse than if I didn't saddle the foil. So instead, I put foil on the top and cut it to match the foil that is already on. This probably isn't the correct way to do this, but it works. Sometimes I can tell where the foil might split, and other times it splits where I don't expect. Now I can pin the pieces and begin soldering. I put flux on the foil before soldering, otherwise the solder won't stick to the foil. For the Ranger, the gap between the second, third, and fifth pieces are too large, even with the foil. To reduce the gap, I put copper wire between each of the pieces and solder it in. I have to make sure I don't overheat the glass and the foil. If the glass overheats, it will crack. If the foil overheats, the adhesive holding it to the glass will melt and the foil won't stick. I alternate which javelin I solder on to make sure I don't overheat the glass and the foil. I attach 2 hooks to each javelin. Now that the pieces have cooled, I wash off the residual flux, solder, and anything else that may be on the glass with dish soap. I want to turn the solder black, which is why I use the black backed foil. To do this, I use a patina solution and brush it onto the foil with an old toothbrush. And once I've turned all the solder black, I wash off the residual patina. I then apply car wax to give the solder a shiny look. And there they are, the Javelin icons from Anthem. I really liked how they turned out, despite the issues I had. If I did these again, I would definitely use a ring saw rather than a Dremel. There is one more video before I start taking viewer requests. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to see more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all through the next pane.